Hi, I'm Madison. I'm a graphic designer working freelance from my little apartment in Portland. I thought I had a pretty good relationship with my family. Sure, we had our differences, but doesn't everyone? But that Sunday afternoon in March changed everything I thought I knew about where I stood in my own family. My mom had called the week before, asking everyone to come over for what she called an important family discussion. My sister Emma lived just 20 minutes away and saw Mom regularly, while I'd driven 3 hours from Portland to be there. I figured maybe Mom wanted to talk about her retirement plans or something normal like that. When I walked into the living room, the atmosphere felt heavy. Mom was sitting in her favorite armchair, the one by the window where she liked to read. Emma was perched on the edge of the couch, unusually quiet, fidgeting with something in her hands. There were papers spread out on the coffee table that I couldn't quite see from where I stood. "Madison, honey, come sit down," Mom said, but her voice had this weird formal tone I'd never heard before. "We need to discuss some important matters regarding the future." I sat down across from them, and that's when I saw what was on the coffee table. Legal documents, a will, and Emma was holding a pen. "Now, I've been thinking a lot about this," Mom began, not quite meeting my eyes. "Emma has been here for me these past few years. She visits twice a week, helps with groceries, drives me to doctor appointments. She's shown real dedication to this family." My stomach started to twist. Where was this going? Emma finally spoke up, her voice soft but somehow smug. "Mom's been feeling overwhelmed about managing everything on her own. We thought it would be better to simplify things." "Simplify what things?" I asked, though part of me already knew I didn't want to hear the answer. Mom picked up the papers and handed them to me. As I read through the legal language, the words started to blur together, but the meaning was crystal clear. The house where Emma and I had grown up, where I'd learned to ride my bike in the driveway, where I'd spent every Christmas morning, was going entirely to Emma. The savings account that Mom had always talked about splitting between us? Emma's name was the only one on it now, even the small investment portfolio that Dad had left when he passed 5 years ago. Everything was being transferred to my sister. "I don't understand," I said, looking up from the papers. What about me?" That's when Mom said the words that I'll never forget. She looked directly into my eyes and said, "Your sister deserves it all, Madison. She's been here. She's been present. You've been focused on your career, living your own life." The room went completely silent except for the sound of my heart hammering in my chest. I looked at Emma, waiting for her to say something, to defend me, to remind Mom that I called every week, that I drove down for every holiday, that I'd flown back immediately when Dad was in the hospital. Instead, Emma just nodded slowly. "It makes sense, Madison. You're doing well with your design work. You don't really need this." "Need this?" I repeated, my voice coming out higher than I intended. "This isn't about need. This is about being part of this family." Mom's expression hardened. "Don't be dramatic, sweetheart. This is a practical decision. Emma will take care of the house, and when something happens to me, she'll make sure everything is handled properly." "But I could help too," I said, hating how desperate I sounded. "I could move back. I could—" "You have your own life," Emma interrupted. "Your career is in Portland. You've made it clear that's where your priorities are." I stared at them both, feeling like I was in some kind of horrible alternate reality. When had I ever said my career was more important than family? When had I ever indicated that I didn't want to be involved in Mom's life? "I visit whenever I can," I said quietly. "I call you every Sunday, Mom. I sent money when you needed that roof repair last year." "And we appreciate that," Mom said in a tone that suggested she didn't appreciate it at all. "But Emma has been here consistently. She's earned this." Earned this. Like being part of a family was something you had to earn through some kind of points system I'd never been told about. I watched, feeling completely numb, as Mom picked up the pen and signed her name at the bottom of the document. Emma signed as a witness. The sound of pen scratching against paper seemed impossibly loud in the quiet room. "There," Mom said, setting the pen down with finality. "Now everything is settled." I sat there for another few minutes, not really hearing whatever they were saying about logistics and making sure everything transfers smoothly. My mind kept replaying the last few years, trying to figure out where I'd gone wrong when I'd apparently failed some test I didn't know I was taking. When I finally stood up to leave, Mom hugged me briefly and said, "You understand, don't you? This is what's best for everyone." I just nodded because I didn't trust my voice to work properly. As I drove the 3 hours back to Portland, I kept thinking about how wrong this felt. Not just unfair, wrong. Like there was something I was missing, some piece of the puzzle that would make it all make sense. Have you ever felt like a stranger in your own family? Like everyone else got a memo about how things work, but somehow you never received it? 2 days later, I was back in my apartment, trying to focus on a logo design for a client, when my phone rang. It was my cousin Sarah, Mom's sister's daughter. "Madison, I heard about the will situation," she said without preamble. "I think you should know that Emma's been telling people you've been pressuring Mom to put you in the will." "What?" I nearly dropped my laptop. I didn't even know about any will until Sunday." "I figured," Sarah said. "That's not like you. But Emma's been painting this picture of you as this greedy daughter who only calls when she wants something. She told Aunt Carol that you've been circling like a vulture ever since Dad died." I felt sick. "Sarah, I swear to you, I had no idea about any of this. I thought everything was fine." "I believe you. But Madison, there's something else. Emma's been having some problems lately. Financial problems. I heard from my mom that she borrowed money from your mom a few months ago and never paid it back." After Sarah hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the wall. Financial problems. That would explain why Emma had been so eager to have that family meeting, why she'd been sitting there with the pen already in her hand like she'd been preparing for this moment. But it still didn't explain why Mom had gone along with it. My mother had always been fair to a fault. When Emma and I were kids, she'd count out Halloween candy to make sure we each got exactly the same amount. She'd set a timer when we played video games so we'd each get equal turns. The woman who had made sure Emma and I got identical Christmas presents every year had just signed away my entire inheritance without even discussing it with me first. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the look on Emma's face when Mom was signing those papers. Not surprised, not guilty, almost relieved. Like she'd been worried about something and now she didn't have to worry anymore. I got up and made coffee even though it was 2 a.m., and I started thinking about the last time I'd really talked to Mom. Not just our weekly Sunday calls where we talked about the weather and what she'd watched on TV, but really talked. It had been months, maybe longer. And Emma had been there for every doctor's appointment, every grocery run. She'd been the one hearing about Mom's daily life, her concerns, her fears about getting older. She'd been positioning herself as the responsible daughter while I was... What? What had I been doing? Working, building my career, living my life 3 hours away. But that was normal, wasn't it? Adult children were supposed to build their own lives. Parents were supposed to want their kids to be independent and successful. I grabbed my laptop and started researching estate law, inheritance rights, anything that might help me understand what had just happened. What I found made me feel even worse. Legally, Mom had every right to leave her estate to whoever she wanted. Even if it felt unfair, even if it hurt, she didn't owe me anything. Children don't automatically inherit from their parents, but morally? Emotionally? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong with this picture. The next morning, I called my mom. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, and her voice sounded normal, like nothing earth-shattering had happened 2 days ago. "Mom, I've been thinking about Sunday," I said carefully. "I just want to make sure you're really okay with everything, that this is really what you want." There was a pause. "Of course it's what I want, Madison. I wouldn't have signed it otherwise. It's just, it felt very sudden, like this decision was made without really talking it through." "Emma and I have been discussing this for months," Mom said, and I noticed she said Emma and I, not we. "She's been so helpful, and you have your own life. This just makes sense." "But Mom, I could be helpful too. If you need more support, I could..." "Madison, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. The decision is made." After I hung up, I realized something that made my chest tight with anxiety. In all my conversations with Mom over the past few months, she'd barely mentioned Emma's visits. She'd talk about her book club, her neighbor's cat, the new grocery store, but she'd never once said, "Emma came by yesterday and helped me with this," or "Emma and I did that." For someone who was supposedly there twice a week, Emma was remarkably absent from Mom's stories about her daily life. I spent the rest of the week in a weird fog, going through the motions of work but constantly distracted. I kept picking up my phone to call Mom or Emma, then putting it down again. What was I going to say? "Hey, I know you've legally cut me out of the family, but can we talk about it?" Then, on Friday afternoon, something happened that changed everything. I was walking to my mailbox when my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, called out to me from her garden. "Madison, dear, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is your grandmother's locket very valuable?" I stopped walking. "My grandmother's locket? The one you always wear when you visit home. My granddaughter is studying jewelry design and she noticed it the last time you were here. She said it looked like an antique, possibly quite old." I reached up automatically to touch my neck, but I wasn't wearing the locket. I hadn't worn it in... When was the last time I'd worn it? "Mrs. Chen, I think you might be thinking of someone else. I don't have a locket from my grandmother." She looked confused. "Oh, I'm sorry. I could have sworn... Well, these old eyes aren't what they used to be." But as I walked back to my apartment, something was nagging at me. A locket. Why did that word feel familiar? That evening, I was going through old photos on my laptop looking for pictures from family gatherings when I found it. A photo from my college graduation 6 years ago. There I was in my cap and gown, standing between Mom and Emma, and around my neck was a delicate gold locket. I zoomed in on the photo. I definitely remembered wearing it that day, but I couldn't remember anything else about it. Where had it come from? Why wasn't I wearing it anymore? I called Emma. "Hey," I said when she picked up. "Quick question. Do you remember that locket I used to wear? The gold one?" There was a long pause. "Locket? Yeah, I found an old photo and I'm wearing this gold locket at my graduation. I can't remember where it came from." "Oh, that old thing," Emma said, but her voice sounded weird. "Careful. I think you left it at Mom's house ages ago, probably in your old bedroom. Do you know where it came from originally?" "Madison, I honestly don't remember. Why are you asking about some old piece of jewelry?" "Just curious," I said, but after I hung up I couldn't stop thinking about it. Emma's reaction had been strange. Not just forgetful, but almost. Nervous? I spent the weekend going through more old photos, and I found the locket in pictures going back years. Family Christmas photos, birthday parties, even some pictures from high school. I was wearing it in almost every family photo until about 2 years ago, and then suddenly, nothing. How do you just forget about a piece of jewelry you wore that consistently? Sunday night, I made a decision. I was going to drive down to Mom's house and look for that locket. Not because I thought it was valuable, but because something about this whole situation felt wrong, and maybe finding it would help me remember things more clearly. I called Mom Monday morning. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, same as always. "Mom, I was thinking of coming down this weekend to pick up some things from my old room. Would that be okay?" "Of course, but Emma might be here too. She's been staying over more often lately to help me with things around the house." "That's fine," I said, though my stomach clenched. "I'll try not to get in the way." "You're never in the way, Madison. This is still your home too." But as I hung up, I wondered if that was really true anymore. That Saturday morning, I drove to Mom's house with a strange mix of determination and dread. I'd spent the week thinking about that locket, and the more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that it was somehow important. Not just the locket itself, but what it might represent, some piece of my family history that I'd somehow lost track of. When I pulled into the driveway, Emma's car was already there. Through the front window, I could see her and Mom sitting at the kitchen table, papers spread out between them. Again. It seemed like every time I came home lately, there were papers and serious conversations that I wasn't part of. I knocked before using my key, which felt weird. This had been my home for 18 years, but now I felt like I needed permission to enter. "Madison," Mom called out, sounding genuinely happy to see me. Come in, Emma and I were just going over some insurance paperwork. Emma looked up and smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Hey, stranger. Mom said you wanted to look through your old room. Yeah, just some nostalgic stuff, I said, trying to keep my voice casual. You know how it is. I headed upstairs to my childhood bedroom, which Mom had kept largely unchanged since I'd moved out. The walls were still painted the pale yellow I'd chosen when I was 15, and my old desk still had pencil marks from high school homework sessions. I started going through my old dresser drawers looking for the locket, but also just remembering. Here was my high school yearbook, some old CDs, a jewelry box that played a tinny version of Für Elise when you opened it. And there, in the bottom of the jewelry box, was the locket. The moment I picked it up, memories came flooding back. Grandma Rose had given it to me on my 16th birthday. She'd called me into her little sewing room. She'd lived with us for my last 2 years of high school and told me it had been her mother's before her. This is very special, Madison, she'd said, fastening it around my neck with shaky hands. It's been in our family for 3 generations. Someday, when I'm gone, you'll understand why I wanted you to have it. I'd worn it constantly after that. It became like a part of me, this connection to family history that felt solid and real. But then, Grandma Rose had passed away during my senior year of college, and somehow, in all the grief and chaos of that time, I'd stopped wearing it. I opened the locket now, expecting to find the tiny photos that used to be inside, one of Grandma Rose as a young woman and one of her mother. But instead, there was something I didn't remember. A small, folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. My hands were shaking as I unfolded it. It was a note in Grandma Rose's careful handwriting. Madison, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you've found what I hoped you'd find. The safety deposit box key is taped under the bottom drawer of my old sewing table, box 247 at First National. Some things your mother doesn't know, some things she should. Trust your heart, sweet girl. You were always the one who saw clearly. All my love, Grandma Rose. I read it 3 times before the words really sank in. A safety deposit box. Things Mom didn't know. I sat on my old bed holding the note, trying to process what this meant. Grandma Rose had left me some kind of message, some kind of inheritance that apparently Mom didn't know about. But why the secrecy? And why had I never found this note before? Then I remembered. I'd never actually opened the locket after Grandma Rose died. It had hurt too much. I just put it away and tried not to think about it. Footsteps on the stairs interrupted my thoughts. Emma appeared in the doorway. Find what you were looking for? She asked, and her eyes immediately went to the locket in my hands. Actually, yeah, I said, standing up. Emma, do you remember Grandma Rose's old sewing table? The one with all the little drawers? Emma's expression shifted slightly. Of course, it's still in the basement. Why? I was thinking about her today, wondering if any of her things were still around. Mom kept most of her furniture, Emma said, but she was watching me carefully. Madison, what's really going on? You've been acting strange lately. I almost told her about the note right then. Emma and I had shared everything growing up, secrets, fears, dreams about our futures. But something held me back. Maybe it was the way she'd been sitting with those papers every time I came home. Maybe it was the careful way she'd answered when I asked about the locket on the phone. Nothing's going on, I said, slipping the locket into my pocket. Just feeling sentimental, I guess. That night, after Emma had gone home and Mom was asleep, I crept down to the basement. The sewing table was exactly where it had always been, in the corner under the small window. It looked smaller than I remembered, but still sturdy and beautifully made. I found the bottom drawer and pulled it out completely. Taped to the underside, just like the note had said, was a small silver key. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined what might be in that safety deposit box. Documents, money, more family secrets. And why had Grandma Rose felt the need to hide whatever it was from Mom? Monday morning, I called in sick to work and drove straight to First National Bank. I'd called ahead to explain the situation, and they'd told me I'd need to bring documentation proving Grandma Rose's death and my relationship to her. Fortunately, I'd kept copies of everything from when she passed. The bank manager, a kind woman named Mrs. Patterson, led me down to the vault area. "Box 247 has been paid up through this year," she said as we walked. "Your grandmother set up automatic payments. She was very specific about wanting it maintained." She used her key and my key together to open the box, then left me alone in a small private room with its contents. The box was larger than I'd expected, and it was full. There were legal documents, a will, dated just 6 months before Grandma Rose died. As I read through it, my hands started shaking again. She'd left everything to me, not just her personal belongings, which I'd assumed had been handled when she died, but everything. A life insurance policy I'd never heard of, stock certificates, and most shocking of all, the deed to the house. Our family home legally belonged to Grandma Rose at the time of her death, and according to this will, it now belonged to me. But how was that possible? Mom had been paying the mortgage for years. She'd just signed a will leaving the house to Emma. I kept reading, and slowly, the picture became clear. Grandma Rose had bought the house outright in 1987, before Mom and Dad were married. When they'd moved in with her, they'd insisted on paying what they thought was a mortgage, but Grandma Rose had just been putting that money into savings. Savings that, according to these documents, also now belonged to me. There were bank statements going back decades, showing the mortgage payments being deposited into an account that had grown to over $200,000. And there was a letter addressed to me in Grandma Rose's handwriting. "My dearest Madison, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've discovered what I never had the courage to tell your mother while I was alive. The house is yours, sweetheart. It was always meant to be yours. Your mother is a good woman, but she's always been easily influenced by others. I've watched Emma manipulate situations since she was a little girl, and I've seen how your mother responds to that manipulation. You, on the other hand, have always been honest and direct. You see things clearly, even when others don't want you to. I'm leaving everything to you not because I love you more, but because I trust you to do the right thing. I trust you to take care of your mother and to make sure Emma doesn't take advantage of her good nature. Check the bank statements carefully, my dear. Emma has been forging your mother's signature on withdrawals for the past year. I discovered this shortly before I became ill, but I didn't have the strength to handle it myself. I'm counting on you to set things right. The real estate attorney's information is in the envelope marked legal. He's been waiting to hear from you. All my love and faith in you, Grandma Rose P.S. Emma knows about this box. She's been trying to find the key for 2 years. Be careful." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Emma knew. Emma had been looking for this box, which meant she knew that Grandma Rose had left everything to me, and she'd been forging Mom's signature to steal money from the account. The will that Mom had signed last weekend wasn't just unfair, it was completely invalid. She couldn't leave Emma a house that she didn't actually own. I spent the next 2 hours going through every document in the box. Bank statements showing Emma's forged withdrawals, almost $15,000 over the past year. Medical records showing that Mom's frequent doctor visits that Emma had mentioned were actually just routine checkups. She wasn't sick or declining like Emma had implied. And a psychiatric evaluation report that made my blood run cold. Apparently, Emma had convinced Mom to see a therapist 6 months ago, claiming that Mom was becoming forgetful and making poor decisions. The therapist's notes, which Grandma Rose had somehow obtained, showed that Emma had been feeding Mom false information about her own mental state, making her doubt her memory and judgment. It was gaslighting on a systematic level. I carefully copied everything, put the originals back in the safety deposit box, and drove home to Portland in a daze. I needed time to think, to plan, to figure out how to handle this without destroying what was left of my family. But before I could decide on my next move, my phone rang. It was Mom. "Madison, honey, I need to ask you something," she said, and her voice sounded shaky. "Did you take something from the house yesterday? Emma said she thinks some of Grandma Rose's jewelry might be missing." "I took the locket that was in my old jewelry box," I said carefully. "The one Grandma Rose gave me. Why?" "Oh." There was a long pause. Emma thought, "Well, she's been going through Grandma Rose's things lately, trying to organize them, and she noticed some items weren't where she expected them to be." "Mom, why is Emma going through Grandma Rose's things? She died 5 years ago." Well, we're trying to get the house organized, and Emma thought it would be good to finally sort through everything properly. I closed my eyes. Emma had been searching for that key. She'd probably torn apart every piece of Grandma Rose's furniture looking for it. Mom, can I ask you something? Do you remember signing any other papers recently? Besides the will, I mean? Papers? Mom sounded confused. What kind of papers? Bank documents, maybe? Anything involving Grandma Rose's old accounts? Oh, well, Emma has been helping me with some financial organization. There have been some papers to sign, but she handles all the details. Why are you asking? My stomach dropped. Emma had been having Mom sign documents without explaining what they were. Probably trying to get access to accounts she didn't know I now legally controlled. It's nothing urgent, I said. I'll talk to you later, okay? After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and made a decision. I couldn't let this continue. Emma was manipulating Mom, stealing money, and making her doubt her own mental capacity, and she was doing it all while positioning herself as the devoted daughter who deserved everything. I called the real estate attorney whose information Grandma Rose had left for me. Ms. Phillips, he said after I explained who I was, I've been wondering when I'd hear from you. Your grandmother made me promise to wait for you to contact me rather than reaching out directly. She left me everything, I said. The house, the accounts, everything. But my mother just signed a will leaving it all to my sister. That's not legally possible, he said gently. Your mother can't bequeath property she doesn't own. But I imagine your sister doesn't know that. We talked for another 30 minutes, and by the end of the conversation, I had a plan. 3 weeks later, I was back in Portland, trying to focus on work, when my phone buzzed with a text message from Emma. We need your help. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. What kind of help? Can you call me? It's about Mom. When I called, Emma's voice was panicked in a way I'd never heard before. Madison, we're in serious trouble. I don't know how this happened, but there are some problems with Mom's finances. The bank is saying there are irregularities with some of the accounts, and they've frozen everything pending an investigation. I knew exactly what had happened. The attorney had contacted the bank about the forged signatures, and they'd started an investigation. What kind of irregularities? I asked. I don't understand all the legal stuff, but something about unauthorized withdrawals and signature verification. Madison, they're talking about pressing charges if we can't prove that Mom authorized everything. Charges against who? There was a pause. Against me. They think I forged Mom's signature on some documents. I waited, letting the silence stretch. Madison, are you there? I'm here. I need you to talk to Mom. She's so confused about everything, and the bank investigators are coming to interview her tomorrow. She needs to remember signing those papers, but she's being so forgetful lately. Forgetful how? She keeps saying she doesn't remember giving me permission to handle certain accounts. But she did, Madison. She's getting older, and sometimes she forgets things. I thought about the psychiatric evaluation in Grandma Rose's safety deposit box, about how Emma had been systematically making Mom doubt her own memory. Emma, exactly how much money are we talking about? It's not about the money, she said quickly. It's about Mom's mental state. If the bank thinks she's not competent to manage her affairs, they could... God, Madison, they could recommend a conservatorship. She could lose control of everything. But I knew that wasn't what Emma was really worried about. She was worried about losing control of everything. How much money? I repeated. About $15,000 over the past year, she admitted. But it was all for Mom's expenses. Doctor visits, home maintenance, things like that. $15,000 worth of doctor visits? And other things. Look, can you please just come down here and help us sort this out? I can't handle this alone, and Mom trusts you. I looked out my apartment window at the Portland skyline and made my decision. I'll be there tomorrow, I said. When I hung up, I called the attorney. It's time, I said. The next morning, I drove to Mom's house for what I knew would be the most difficult conversation of my life, but I also knew it was necessary. Emma had been manipulating and stealing from our mother for over a year, and it had to stop. When I walked into the house, I found Mom sitting at the kitchen table looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Emma was pacing by the window, her phone pressed to her ear. The investigators will be here in an hour, Emma said after hanging up. Mom, you need to remember signing those papers. You need to tell them that you asked me to help with the accounts. But I don't remember, Mom said quietly. Emma, I don't remember signing anything that would let you take that much money. You're just stressed, Emma said. Once this is all sorted out, you'll remember. That's when I pulled out the folder I'd brought with me. Actually, I said, setting it on the table, I think it's time we all remembered some things. Emma turned to look at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes. Madison, what are you doing? I'm fixing things, I said, starting with the truth.